lenses in it, so
Right.
it's not gonna hurt anything. You get first look. Where's this go?
It's a tight squeeze in between.
Alright, we're gonna try this again because I'm a dummy and I made both of my bend marks, and yeah, then I bent it on an angle. I bent it on the inside line on one side and the outside on the other, and that was a problem. So I had to go and cut another piece, throw that one in the trash. Very frustrating. But so I only made one set of marks this time so that I can't bend on the wrong one. All right, so I got that rear panel made that you guys saw last couple shots. We have some time that has passed, and now we have a giant hole in the back of the car here. So I had that rear panel made, or that little floor section that steps down, and then I asked Steve to start taking that or cleaning up the surface rust and stuff that was down in there, and he quickly realized that we really needed to take the rear panel off and separate all the pieces. So this is what we ended up with. I apologize, we didn't film the process. Steve can tell you that it sucked. He drilled a bunch of spot welds out. It's not really a fun job, but what we have here is, this is what I'm gonna call a floor extension. So this is basically from the factory, it kind of steps down, the floor kind of steps up a little bit, and this is like, this connects to this rear panel. So all those holes for spot welds that Steve drilled out, they went all down on this bottom lip, which is really hard to see. And you could obviously see all this rust and dirt was all trapped together, so we made the decision to take this off. They torch cut this piece to be even with the flange that's on that back panel. So Steve drilled out those rivets that were there, and we're going to keep this piece because it does kind of connect from underneath. It makes it look finished. And my panel, let me sit this down. My panel I made is going to go, actually sits, this half here, portion, sits on top of the flange, that's on that. So these pieces will all sandwich that flange together. It'll be plenty strong. It will all look cohesive when it's done. And the best part is we can coat all of this stuff, clean it up, clean the rust off, get rid of jagged edges, and we can coat this in rust encapsulator, all those pieces, before we sandwich them together so that we don't have, you know, major rust propagating out of there. The other thing we decided, and this is where the video is going to get fun, I chose some taillights. So I picked these like 37 Mopar taillights. I never remember which they are, if they're DeSoto, if they're Chrysler. I think they're Chrysler. Imperial Airflow, maybe. But pick these lenses. I need to make buckets for them to fit this. So this panel actually has another inner bracing in it that is here that kind of creates a problem. It's also spot welded and folded. I want to leave it alone. I don't want to take that apart because that outside panel is going to lose its shape and rigidity. So what we need to do is make a bucket that is deep enough so we can service this thing when it's all together. So I need to make a bucket that's we're gonna cut a hole in here, sink down in, there'll be a hole in the face for the taillight obviously, and then we'll be able to service this from the back. So the idea would be that I would have a little bulb holder, or not service it from the back, but the bulb holder and the wiring will come in from the back, and then the idea is from the front, that bucket will hold the lenses, and we can just take a single screw out like factory, take the lens off, and then you can just stick your hand in there and, you know, a little half turn for the bulb. So I got to basically make like tunneled bulb holders, sockets, whatever you want to call it, for this thing. So that's the plan. It's going to be, as always, a lot of work for a project that's not going to look like much is done. It's going to look like I just did a hole saw and screwed 2 lenses on, but it's going to take a while. So that's what we're doing. Clean this up, get to work. All right, cool thing about these lenses and lights, if you get them nice and complete like this, I actually have 2 pairs that are really nice. They had a little, this piece is usually missing, but this is a little bracket that holds this jewel in, or this reflector, and it's threaded. So you actually, to take this lens and everything apart, it's pretty ingenious. You just unthread this little piece here, little brass, copper, whatever it is, piece off the back, off the jewel. You have this little, this part's like probably the hardest thing out of all these lights to find. They're always missing. And then the little jewel comes out, and these little jewels are kind of special to these lights because of that stud. You can make other things work, but it's kind of nice to have that. So that jewel is there, and then you could separate all the pieces, and you have the lens, or the lens and the trim. And this lens, you can see when they were polished or cleaned up, there's a crap ton of polish on them, but we'll clean all that up. But what I can do then is I can just work off of this, and we don't have the danger of me breaking the lenses. So I still have some PTSD after breaking that Stuart Warner gauge on this car. So I'm going to try and be a little more careful as time goes on. So I'm going to take this bezel, and we're going to work off of that. And I'm going to wrap these very expensive and rare lights up and put them in the car for safe keeping for now. So let me get this out of the way. All right, so Steve got these little round pieces made. He cut straps of metal and bent them like you probably saw, and formed them and got them fitting in the hole pretty good. Now I need to basically weld the seam, or at least tack it so that it'll hold itself into shape, and then I can start working on trimming the backside. I want to try, it's going to have to stick out some. You can see it kind of here, it's dark in here, but because of the shape of this inner panel, it actually like dives that way. It's going to have to be, you know, to be flush with the highest part of that, it's going to stick out a little bit here where it's thinner. But trying to make the buckets as shallow as possible so that they don't take up a ton of room and you can get your hand in there to access any of the wiring or that stuff. So I'm going to get the get some of these pinch weld clamps from Eastwood set up, and I can clamp the seam and then carefully pull it out from the backside, and then I'll put a couple tacks on it. Start figuring out our back. We have one of these bulb holders. This is just a one wire. We got to go grab some more from like Napa or whatever, but we got to get 2 wires. But so we need to put these in the end, but I have this one here I can use for size to put my hole in the back plate. So I got everything I need, just a bunch of fiddly work to get these little buckets made for the car. So we're moving along. All right, so in the last couple shots, I was TIG welding the seam to make this a tube and not just a rolled piece of metal. And then I was hammering on the back of the vise because that round shape was actually perfect. So whatever you can find that's the right size, especially on something round like this. So I hammered all the welds flat, dressed them up just a little bit. The nice thing with TIG welding is you can smash the welds flat without having to grind them completely off. So I could basically make them flush. Now I need them to be flush on the outside because it's a very tight fit inside the taillight hole opening. So I wanted everything to fit really nicely, which it does. Tapped it back in, and I just basically decided to push it forward enough that in the back, it's really hard to show because it's, you know, down in here. But the inner structure kind of has like a shape, like angled like that. So you can't, and it's kind of angled this way too, but you can't get that to totally sit flat because it's our bucket, we need it to be, like a square edge in the back, and the inner panel isn't. So I basically lined it up with the deepest point of that so that it's like flush, and then everything where it gets like thinner towards the top here, you're gonna have the bucket sticking out a little bit. It's just not really a good way to do it. The only thing I could potentially do, and I'm gonna look at that before I go further, is I could put the back cap in a little bit so that it's kind of inside of that shape there, the angle, and then I could grind everything flat and cap it off again. I don't really know yet, depends how fancy I want to get. But one thing I am going to do is, these are the pieces of the metal that we actually hole sawed out of the rear panel. They're like the perfect size to use for these caps on the back. Which is going to be the bulb holder. So I'm going to repurpose these, sand all the paint off. They already have a hole drilled in the center of them. and then I'm going to fit them inside here, and wherever I decide to put them, whether it's out all the way or in, I can weld these in or tack them in, and then we will have our back plate to mount the bulb holder to. So nice to keep these little pieces around and be fairly accurate when you're cutting, so you can repurpose them, and saves me a step of cutting those pieces. So, and kind of neat to repurpose the metal. So I'm going to take these, figure out where I'm going to put them, get that tacked in place, and then we'll keep going from there. Alright, so I got the rear panel back off and everything apart. Basically what I was going to start working on is taking, stripping all this area, trying to de-rust everything, wire wheel clean, might even get some rust dissolver in here to get some of it in the areas we can't get to. And then eventually the goal is to put rust encapsulator in and around all the areas. But the first thing I noticed is we have this lower flange on 33-4 that usually has the gas tank cover bolted to it. So this edge is kind of covered, but when you're doing a fenderless hot rod, obviously this flange is exposed. And then also that bottom floor section doubles up to it, and all this stuff kind of comes together and gives it strength. So we do need to keep this flange, we can't just like cut it off. I wanted to fill all the random holes that are either blown out, damaged, whatever. I'm probably going to keep these two holes in the center here because I'm more than likely may want to have the room to hang something over there I'm not sure yet, but either way, we're gonna be filling most, if not all, of these holes and smoothing this all out. So I start cleaning everything up, and then what happened is this over time inside of here, that sharp edge gets stuff sitting in here because this was all boxed in because of the floor section. And as I started cleaning, I started noticing this sharp edge is very thin all through here. It's like pitted, and when you start hitting it and sanding it, it starts getting very, very thin. So I'm a little worried that it's going to get so thin that it's going to start to break over time. May or may not, but I had to do this on Mike's car also, where I think between having to fill all these holes and then also having the worry of that being pitted heavily in the flange, that it's probably easier just to make the part from scratch. So what I'm going to do is take this flat piece of metal here. I've already cut a strip. It's about 1 5/8 inches, the flange. And then cut this off eventually and weld this piece in. I'll have a flat piece of metal to start with that I'm not going to fill all the holes. It's not pitted. It's just going to be a better repair overall. Now the problem with this is it's not just as easy as grabbing a flat piece of metal, cutting it off, welding it on the seam, and being done. The problem is that this has a curvature, like a smiley face here, very ever so slightly. So we need to actually take this strip of metal, put it on the shrinker, shrink the edges, and try and shrink the shape, and possibly even stretch the other side to get this thing to go into that same shape we have here. So I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the shrinker stretcher. I may even drag it over here so I don't have to keep walking, and see if we get this thing shaped. And we'll cut the old piece off, put it on, do another mile of welding, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be ready to clean everything up and start putting it back together after spraying rusting caps. right, so we are in the home stretch of this project, fingers crossed, hopefully. This is, went from like mounting taillights to spiraling out of control here. So I got everything spot welded back together. I sanded, actually filed this bottom edge I made here, looking really good. Pretty happy with it. The next thing I'm tackling is just kind of final finishing here. So you can see I have a piece made. It's a little long still, but I have a piece made for this corner here. What happens on these 33-4s is originally this lip you would never see because a gas tank cover would sit like right here, cover the gas tank, and they weren't worried about how nice that looked or how finished it was. So right here where all these pieces come together, every 33-4 that's fenderless that hasn't been modified, you're going to see something like this where you're going to see the floor pan area that kind of sticks underneath of it. You have the corner, then you have this piece here, and sometimes the fitment of all these pieces isn't great because they weren't worried, it wasn't meant to be finished. So now that it is finished, it's, you know, it's an eyesore. So what I'm going to do is make a little sliver or piece to kind of fill all this in, and then I'll cut, you know, I'll cut the line in it so that it matches the body line here all the way down, and it'll be finished out a little bit, but it's basically, I'm just going to make this sliver like I made on the other side. I'm actually going to overlap this original metal and cut it there, so I'm welding more in the center and not trying to weld on the edge, which is probably a little thin from it being pitted and stuff over the years, but just a little detail there. Steve, as you saw, punched some holes in the edge of this panel that I made in the very beginning of this project, which seems like a lifetime ago. He punched all those holes so we can bolt that in from inside the floor or inside the trunk, and that kind of finishes everything out. So he's just cleaning up some of my jagged cuts and just burrs and stuff, and after I do these little corner pieces, we'll be ready to kind of bolt everything back together for the final time and put our taillights in and finally see what the back end's going to look like on this thing. All right, so we got the car rolled outside for the first time in probably a couple years. I think the last time we had it out to look at it was when we put the Ardun in after getting it back from Ron. And it's pretty crazy. The amount of work that I've done has been spread out, but it's very impactful. Doing the door gaps, the firewall, pedals and master cylinder being on there, the headlights, now the tail lights and the rear pan being dialed in. It makes a world of difference. The car looked cool no matter what, but now it's starting to kind of come together. You can see what it's going to be. The back end of the car I've kind of ignored since we fixed the trunk opening area. I haven't really done anything with, so we spent a lot of time here. And this project took 3 times as long as I thought it would take. Even today, doing the last little bit with these corners and cutting the gaps in and everything, that took almost a whole day. So it was a lot of work just to do these little details. But really happy with how it all came out. The Chrysler Imperial or Airstream taillights look phenomenal. I'm really stoked with them. I could have went with some of the other Mopar ones from the same year that are a little fancier, but I think these are subdued. They're a little, just a step up from like Pontiac taillights, but they're not so overwhelming that they just totally take over the whole look of the car. Of course, I'm going to add a license plate in the center here and do something for a plate light. All that will come down the line, but right now we got that rear panel that steps down and connects to the original lower floor section, all bolted and then welded in. This rear panel is actually still removable with that original floor section, and then the piece I made, I welded into my sub rails and floors. So you can still service this and take it out. There's a lot of work to do it that way, but I'm pretty happy with it. Next is probably to take care of the wheel wells. Some of that is the last stuff that I haven't really touched. They cut the wheel wells out when they channeled it. I need to fix some of that and finish that all out. And I'm going to connect that into what I did in these corners here. Really stoked on these corners. This whole bottom edge cleans up the car incredibly, because 33.4s, as I mentioned earlier, this area is not finished nicely whatsoever because there was a panel over it. So now it's finished out nicely. So really excited to maybe see a light at the end of the tunnel. We'll be soon on to doing some mechanical stuff, getting it set up so that we can actually maybe fire this thing this year and maybe even make it lot drivable. We'll see what happens. You never know with our crazy lives if I have to get off the car for a couple of months. But I'm going to try and keep on this car and keep working on it almost every week and keep making big progress on it. So thank you guys for following along. Let us know what you think of the tail light and the rear panel that we've done on the car here. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.